Hi everyone, and thank you for joining us today. Welcome to our webinar on reframing the talent shortage in regulated industries. My name is Hazel and I'm part of the marketing team here at Rullion, and I have the pleasure of being your host today. I'm joined by three fantastic subject matter experts, Dan and John from Rullion and Miguel from Megawatt, who will be sharing their insights with us shortly. Before we get started, I'll run through a bit of housekeeping. The webinar is live today, but it is also being recorded. So if you need to drop off early or would like to watch it again, don't worry, we will send you the recording. We've got a few slides and a short video to show you first, and then we'll move into the main part of the session, which is a panel discussion, where we'll be answering the questions you submitted when you registered. There's also a chat function available, which I'll be keeping an eye on. So please add your questions in there as we go along. Okay, I think we should get started. Dan, do you want to introduce yourself?
Myself off there, mute. Apologies. Thanks, Hazel. For anyone I've met yet, my name is Dan Crerand, and I'm the Director of Education Solutions here at Rullion. So I spent the last probably 10 years working in early careers, more recently in upskilling, helping organizations think differently about how they attract, develop, retain talent. I suppose at Rullion, my focus is in connecting clients with people, looking at potential of skills and opportunities, particularly in the infrastructure markets. I work on things like apprenticeships, graduate programs, industrial placements. But the reason I'm here today is probably more so to talk about train to deploy, how we work with bringing in kind of underrepresented talents into our industry of our clients, and we will talk about that a little bit more later. But for now, I'll hand it over to John.
Hi, I'm John Shepherd. I'm a Client Services Director here at Rullion. I've had 15 years experience working in recruitment and talent strategy. And in that time, I've worked across some of the UK's most complex and regulated sectors in the past, rail, rolling stock, and more recently across the energy sector. And one of the areas that I work with organisations in my role now is about planning and building their future talent and workforce. So hopefully I'll be able to give you some insight on that as we go through today. Miguel?
Hi everyone, my name is Miguel Trenkel-Lopez. I'm the founder at Megawatt, and we have a mission to raise energy literacy through play. I started my career in the energy sector, specifically in nuclear decommissioning. So I've kind of gone through the sector, and now my role is to bring more people into it and ultimately try and attract talent to the energy sector, which is what we'll be talking about today.
Thanks, Miguel, for joining us. I think I want to start with something we hear quite a lot now, whether it's in boardrooms, project meetings, talent team calls. It's always we can't find the talent. And if you're not one of those people, then you're doing a great job. But I think fundamentally, it's probably a challenge that a lot of us are looking at across the board. I think when we talk to leaders across regulated industries, the real challenges often go beyond that. It's not just really about, I guess, finding people. It's about we're looking at the kind of same in-demand specialists driving up project costs. That's what happens when it's a candidate-driven market. We're looking at teams who are having to constantly backfill, and my team love their clients, but we are backfilling for our clients because they are being pulled between projects, and ultimately organizations are kind of competing for the same limited talent pools, I would say. And budgets naturally will come under pressure because if the only lever seems to be paying more for the same people, that puts us under a bit of pressure. So for me, I think this slide very much is about the question becoming, is there really no talent, or are we just relying on the same small group of people to deliver everything? Because when you kind of zoom out across the wider labour market, there are actually huge pools of people with adjacent transferable capability, something I'm really passionate about, which is untapped potential. So simply put, I would say our hiring systems probably weren't really designed to find these people. And secondly, our hiring systems were designed to hire people who have already done the job before. That's how we've always hired. That's how we've always recruited in the world of HR and recruitment. It's been in place for decades. So I think today is very much a case of bringing Miguel in from a completely different angle, talking through John and his experience working with his clients, and maybe looking to reframe that conversation. Instead of sort of saying constantly, where is the talent? Maybe we start asking the question, which is, how do we build talent instead of competing for it? And that will set the context for why today why the challenge is becoming so critical, I guess, right now. John will come into the equation and he's going to walk through what's happening in the market and the scale of the shift ahead. Hand over to yourself, John.
Thanks, Dan. We've all seen negative headlines like you've got on here, whether that's on LinkedIn, industry publications, or even national media. But we believe that it's how we're talking around the market, how we're talking around hiring, that is the bigger problem than the hiring itself. Like, negativity is dominating that message and it's overshadowing opportunity. Phrases like skills shortage have become the default narrative, and they're often rooted around fear. We can't find the talent, we're in crisis. But the real issue isn't a lack of talent, it's more the way and where we look for that talent. But what if that wasn't the case? What if we could change that narrative? If we could prove that the right talent is out there, and that we can find the right candidates, but also there's plenty of them. Because this scarcity, that's what's holding back. It's holding back the industry. It's stifling opportunity, and that opportunity is for companies to grow and build a diverse workforce. And the opportunity is also for the incredible candidates out there who are looking for the next step in their career. If you go on to the next slide, please, Hazel. This is just proving that there's a massive flaw in the shortage message. It's not true. Like, abundance is already here. We've already we can prove that. Like, we've been told, everyone on this call will have heard for years that there's a skills shortage and warning about this talent crisis. But if you look at the energy sector in the UK, it's growing and has been for way over a decade. The Nuclear Industry Association, every year they post the jobs map, amongst other things on there. It says about the number of people working in the civil nuclear sector. In the past 3 years, that's increased by 52%. And if you look broader across green jobs, I know green jobs is a real catch-all term, but the FT over the last 10 years has said that, look, the increase there is 45% over a decade. Like, these aren't signs of scarcity. This isn't a message that we've been hearing for the last 10 years. This is signs of growth, that the talent has been out there even when we've been in a talent crisis. So it is abundant, has been, it must have been to fill those roles, but that isn't necessarily an easy concept for everyone to cling on to. But on the flip side of that, nor is trying to find the needle in the haystack, which is what we're effectively saying we're doing. So we have been booking the idea that scarcity has existed. We have been, absolutely, but there is a much bigger demand coming down the tracks, and that is why we need to continue to change to really turn that scarcity piece into abundance, look at how we can recruit. And on the next slide here, this shows what is happening. Again, this is energy sector, really, and what that demand's looking like. And yeah, this is energy, but there's a lot of other industries that are in the growth period. But here we are. If we're looking at growth here, like, we're in this energy transition. It's happening. There's talk about it in the papers and on media that it's coming. It's not coming. It's happening now. We're in the middle of a new version of an industrial revolution where massive change is happening. Traditional heavy industry, burning fossil fuels, that's in decline. We're becoming more of a service industry, service economy, increased use of electric cars, tech advancements. They all need vast quantities of electricity, and we need to deliver that. You've also got in the background clean energy targets like net zero, and real push for energy security at a national level. If you look at in the past the war in Ukraine and more recently what's happening in the Middle East, what that does to oil prices. So really getting a secure energy strategy at a country level is so important. So that's why the numbers are going up. But what are those numbers like? Well, there's about 1.5 million people working in the energy sector right now. But in the next, under 10 years now, that energy demand is going to go up by 50%. And to deal with that, look, there's 700,000 new jobs as part of the Clean Energy Jobs Plan. And to meet those demands, about 173,000 new engineers need to come into the sector. Like, these are massive numbers. So that scale is huge. That's why we need to continue to look differently in how we hire into the sectors. That kind of positions where we are at the moment. And on the last slide here, this is kind of a why, and we'll open up discussions now with Dan, Miguel, and myself, because this scarcity, it fuels fear, but abundance fuels strategy. And with 700,000 new jobs coming, like, we need strategy. We can't just hope that that's going to happen. Like, we need that strategy, because the talent pools, we don't think they are missing. They're potentially misdirected, overlooked, or underdeveloped. We just need to broaden where we look. And today we're going to talk through some of those areas of where we can change, both short term, right now, medium and long term, how we do widen that lens and start hiring and building better workforces. Over to you, Dan.
Thanks, John. That's really helpful context. Good thing about working in energy and critical infrastructure recruitment is I'm genuinely learning a lot every day, not to kind of demean the industries I worked in prior to Rullion, but it is a really interesting climate to be part of. So I think what that shows is it's quite clear that this isn't a supply problem. I think it's often a systems and pathways problem. I think if we want to start changing outcomes, particularly in sectors like energy, engineering, infrastructure, the traditional approaches just won't get us there. I think if we want to unlock more talent, we need to start thinking about things like, how do we design job descriptions? How do we invest in training and upskilling? How are we going to inspire people to see themselves in these industries in the first place? The people unemployed is up about 1.84 million. So that's up 280,000 year on year. People that are unemployed, looking for work, but maybe can't picture themselves in that position. And then the final one is really to do with how we engage in education. I think youth unemployment for 16 to 24-year-olds is now around 16%, close to 11-year high. Nearly 1 million people in the UK are NEET, so not in education or training. And I think my fear of this all is that we're sending them towards the same places, and that's why these things are happening. The market's changing for people that are not early careers, and it's becoming really difficult. So definitely it's going to be challenging for early careers. We're sending them in the same directions they've always gone in. And I think that's where I came across Miguel. I thought to myself, this is disruption in a positive way, what he's doing with Megawatt. I guess what really stood out was the creative way Megawatt was helping young people understand energy, the transition, and the careers connected to it. I think from my perspective, I know he's not the first person that's trying something new or trying to change it, and Megawatt are not on their own, but to stimulate different thinking, you do need different techniques. And I think when I asked Miguel to come meet us in London, I think what that looked like, and it was myself, John, my colleague Tom, and Miguel, and you had 4 grown adults sitting around a table playing Megawatt and running through the game, talking about energy. And I promise you, I learned so much. I retained it. I still talk about it. And as someone who's worked with young people quite frequently, it's stuff like that which drives change. Everyone was laughing. They were competitive, which is, I mean, you've 4 competitive chaps in the room that day. Everyone was curious. The current learning system, for me, it wasn't just a game. It was going, right, okay, I actually want to understand why that is happening in that way. And I think the current learning system is doing its best. I think where we can breathe new life into the learning system, things like this is always going to be music to my ears. So rather than me kind of doing a really half job of explaining it, I'm going to pass over to Miguel.
Thanks, Dan. What a lovely introduction. Appreciate it. So I'll just start off by giving a little bit about background about Megawatt. So ultimately, so we're a non-profit company, so we're a community interest company. Our mission is to raise energy literacy through play, and ultimately what we're trying to do is attract talent to the energy sector, get diverse, informed young people considering careers in energy. We're working across the kind of whole energy sector, so we work with energy companies to do that. Sorry, Hazel, can we just stay on that slide? We work with energy companies to deliver community engagement, social value into schools. And so we've got a number of energy companies that I'll talk about in a second. We've delivered Megawatt. We're focused on the UK, but we've actually got Megawatt in 20 countries across the world. It's in 4 different languages, and so we're kind of growing in that way. And I come from an energy background, so we've kind of introduced a lot of the energy systems learning that I've come from into a kind of a format that works for schools. But rather than talk about Megawatt, I kind of wanted to have this really short video so you can kind of get a sense of what does a Megawatt workshop look like in a school. So jump over this video. Thank you. I can't hear it. I'm not sure if anyone else can.
No, same.
Hazel, I'm not sure if the sound's working.
May have to have you on standby to do some commentary over the top of this if it doesn't work again.
Yeah, I can see. Yeah, that's true. Yeah. Okay, if that sounds like I can kind of talk over it. Basically, we have a full day of workshops. We teach young people about different forms of energy through some hands-on activities. We minimize how much I'm talking. It looks like I'm doing a lot of talking, but that's not the case. And then we walk through a series of workshops. So we look at different forms of energy. We look at how different countries make energy. So we look at the electricity mix of different countries, looking at their geography, showing how they would do it. Students then build their own country. So they learn about Jeju Island in South Korea and build their own country. We teach them about the grid. So there's loads of learning beforehand. So it's really building their knowledge of systems thinking, using teamwork, communication, all kind of stuff. And then finally, this is the game. So this is what Dan was referring to. You play a game called Megawatt. It's a competitive game. Students are building a diverse grid, competing against each other. And there are events that occur. So it might be real world events that affect you based on what you've built. We then have a career session. So we work with employers who come along and support the day. As part of it, we have a career session where they talk about different routes into energy, whether that is through grad schemes or apprenticeships or direct recruitment, and kind of opening their eyes to opportunities in the energy sector. And I probably shouldn't explain what he's saying, but I think that will do for the video, I guess. It's a shame the sound didn't work, but hopefully that was okay replacement. All right.
Thanks, Miguel. You did a great job. I'll let you continue.
Gave it a good go. Yeah, so I just want to explain a little bit more about how we work with schools. So we've got a full program that has lesson plans, slides, worksheets. It's all curriculum aligned. So the way we work with schools is we go in and deliver a full day of workshops alongside our sponsors. We train and brief the teachers on using all the resources. We supply them with those resources, and then we support them to integrate it into curriculum learning. So the idea is that it's not a one-off activity, but actually we're enabling schools to teach about energy in a much more engaging way. Another challenge schools have is that energy topic, energy data gets out of date very quickly. A lot of schools are working with textbooks from 2018, which, as you guys know, would not be an accurate representation of the electricity grid today. So we make sure all resources are up to date. It's also something that schools actually want. So it's not just something that we're forcing upon them, but it means that they meet their curriculum, it meets delivery of their gaps to benchmark, which is about career education. And they also have something called a climate action plan, which schools now have to meet. One of those pillars of the action plan is how do you teach about green skills and careers in that space. So we kind of tick that box. We have almost over 400 schools in our network that want to get megawatts. These are schools that come to us and say we want Megawatt. Over 1,000 students have been surveyed. 93% said they enjoyed Megawatt, and there's a doubling of the number of students before and after our workshops who would consider a career in energy. So we have some really robust data to show that actually by participating in Megawatt, the interest in careers is much higher, the knowledge of electricity is much higher. And we've worked with the Association for Science Education and Royal Meteorological Society to make sure all our resources are accredited, and it's something that schools want and need. In terms of how we work with employers, next slide, please, Hazel. Yeah. So we work with companies to kind of support them into reaching schools. So we're that trusted bridge between the energy sector and schools. Teachers are busy, schools are busy places. They only really engage with with programs they trust. So having something like Megawatt means that you can access these schools in a much better way. Our program is ready to deploy within weeks. We have everything set up so we can deliver at scale. And we also have really robust kind of evaluation and measurement of the impact, so you can kind of share that. We've worked with a lot of different energy companies. A few of those are highlighted here. So we've got Infinis, or a solar farm developer, Ørsted, or an offshore wind developer, and Statkraft, the Europe's largest renewable energy generator. We work with these to support their community engagement and social value. So a lot of these companies have funds to support local engagement with schools, and we've worked with them on that basis. But this goes beyond just recruitment and STEM outreach and nice to have. You know, there's so many different things that you within the company that you can make use of Megawatt. So one is that a lot of companies now have much higher requirements for social value, but employee engagement, often companies have volunteer days and their employees aren't using them. Really great way of raising brand awareness. Our brand and marketing is really strong, and we can kind of support businesses using Megawatt. And obviously what we're talking about today, recruitment. So it's not, there's so many different facets that something like Megawatt can support. And we're not just working in schools, we're working with colleges, universities. We're really trying to fill that full funnel. So we go from primary school all the way to universities. And the way we see Megawatt, if we zoom out a little bit, is Megawatt is step one in a wider recruitment funnel. So we're seeing thousands of students each year play Megawatt, and quite a good proportion of them really enjoy it, really want to learn more, have realized that energy is actually quite interesting, but that's not going to turn them into an energy engineer. There's loads of steps between Megawatt and getting a job in all of these companies. And so that's where we want to work with Rullion, we want to work with employers like yourselves to build that recruitment funnel. And so that's why I'm here on this call. We're working with Dan about how to build this out and fitting into the Train to Deploy program and various bits that Dan wants to talk about.
Perfect, thank you. And I think I'm going to talk in the absence of potentially Hazel's failed mic currently. But thanks, Miguel. I think from my perspective, I think we couldn't be more aligned in that respect. I think what drives me has always been doing something different for our clients, not just using the same job boards, the same tools, assessment, working with the same unis and colleges. As I said before, you don't want to be overly dramatic about things, but there's something a little bit broken about things. I think we're doing a fantastic job as a recruitment, HR, business world, but it's about what more we can do. And to see change, I think we need to change. And that's what Miguel does well. Sure, this is energy. You might work in AI, rail, digital, whatever it might be, but I think the logic's the same. If we are seeing the same sort of challenges, we need to get into a position where we start to do things differently. This is probably my one slide for today, which is probably music to a lot of people's ears. I'm just going to walk through what is the Train to Deploy model. And keeping it quite short and sweet. I think sometimes when you hear models like this, sometimes it sounds a little bit overly glamorous or something which is a lot more comprehensive and complex than you would consider. But effectively what we do is we connect the right people. We find the right people, we source them, we assess them, we train them with the skills you actually need, and then we employ them. We then place them into your business for an agreed period of time, and then it's often driven by things such as you might want to improve your diversification, you might want to help, you might be struggling to fill roles because there's just not the talent in that local area or market, you might have poor retention, want to increase your local community footprint, you might have some retirement cliff edges, or perhaps where the candidate-driven market means budgets are just not going as far as they used to. In terms of the 5 pillars of Train to Deploy, first one being kind of match first, train after. I think we focus on behaviors and potential rather than CV specifically on their own. I think our program powers candidates who are motivated, they're adaptable, enabling them to kind of thrive in evolving roles and shifting industries. And that's a priority for 85% of organizations. A success may rely on, for me, it will rely on hiring people who can be reskilled again and again. So if you come through, bring someone through Train to Deploy, they've shown an appetite to upskill or reskill into something completely different. And that's perfect for me in many respects. That's something I'll say over and over again, because if 85% of jobs in 2030 don't exist yet, for me, it's all about finding a John or a Joan Smith who's happy to switch industries today in 2026, because most likely John or Joan will happily shift again in 2, 4, 6 years as and when the market kind of continues to evolve. So we base that on looking at identifying transferable skills nice and early. So we might be looking for a rail technician, we might look for ex-mechanic or someone that worked in aviation, a skilled tool user, and we'll train them to work on a train. We've explored really interesting ways of retaining really good people. I worked with one client where we had a trade type role where it was quite physically demanding on the person as they were approaching the kind of later stages, self-admitted, of their career. But they weren't ready to retire. The market, the economy is not that easy anymore. And we had a conversation. We said, look, you've got so much experience and knowledge. What could that person do if it's not physically demanding roles? And we looked at it and we created a pathway where we effectively turned them into project planners. They had such knowledge of the industry, the regulations, the health and safety, the sites, the market. And effectively, we brought them back a level and said, right, let's get you training into being a Primavera P6, or we put them through kind of more soft skills, more skills related to the technicalities of the role itself. And that's a natural fit for retaining really good people who want to stay. And the fit is really big around this model because for me, it's about going, we don't have a bench of people. We kind of want to work with you and say, what do you want to achieve, and find that person that will fit your team. You'll have a chance to interview them. Once you've kind of signed them off, we do our work and effectively bring somebody that wants to work for you as a client. And to do that, we have tailored training pathways. Training is built around what your business needs, not a catalog of skills. We have a real great network of partners. We can either support you with, immediate requisitions, so you might have hard to fill roles. And effectively, we just upskill somebody via a learning pathway. It might be 1, 2, 3, 4 weeks, whatever it may be, but that effectively gives you a solution for an immediate in-demand role. And then the other arm of things, which is what I'd like to do a little bit more of our clients, is sitting down and doing a bit more strategic co-creation. So that's more of a long-term solution. Look at that long ongoing needs. Are you hiring 10 of these people per month over this period of time? What can we do to create a solution for you that will give them exactly the training you'll require? Because at the end of the day, I always welcome this. I feel like I know education, I know training, I know recruitment, but speaking to some of these knowledgeable hiring managers or business leaders, they know their market, their skill, their sector. I don't. So let's kind of sit down. We do the heavy lifting, and then we go away and create something which is kind of bespoke to your market. We do that with a network of partners. So we're continuously looking to build new relationships to whether that's training providers, skills councils, industry bodies, different ways for us to kind of continually evolve and uncover new training approaches and programs. So whether that's nuclear, rail, digital energy, we're constantly evolving to ensure we're meeting the future needs of our critical project clients. And I think the one thing I would say about it, we try and find cost-effective solutions. We want this. It's not working enough in the market right now because we still got this abundance, but yet gaps. So it's about going, how do we make this a lot more tangible for our clients? And that might mean looking at more funded opportunities. It might mean looking at more collaborative partnerships, alternative delivery models, different ways that we can reduce the cost for our hiring managers and their businesses. Because once we've done that, it makes it a lot easier to maximize the value and actually get these types of things approved. It's rapid. It can be rapid. Yes, there's a long-term view for certain things, but I think at the end of the day, we have quick fill capability. People are ready to hit the ground for immediate business needs. Time to productivity, reduce the ramp up time is something I always try and do. So effectively, we have people joining your business. They are skilled. They are ready to go. We'll work with you or your requirements, because sometimes we will have clients who maybe they see new starters coming in and they'll do their training further training in induction or week 3, week 6, week 12, sometimes further beyond. Whereas we can do this up front and allow productivity from day one. So that immediately says the workers are going to be productive, which is a real positive news story. But one real call out, I suppose, from my perspective is that it's also the managers. I think people forget the demands on the managers of having to bring constantly new flows of people, new projects, whether that's actual formal training or on-the-job training. That is a drain on a manager that's not then able to do their job of managing. Yes, I appreciate a lot of it is looking after their team, but from a training perspective, pass that scalability across to someone like ourselves, and it naturally will see a much more productive manager population. And that's what we want to do, is kind of bringing it down to its bottom terms. We want to make life as easy as possible for our clients and their hiring managers, and just actually find a solution where we kind of co-create. And then last but not least, is to do with driving social value. So I think the social purpose aspect has always been critical to my model. I joined just over probably 2.5 years ago now, and I think working with partners, we have partners like Bridge of Hope, people that want to do good, organizations who allow us to kind of work together, and they ultimately provide access to motivated talent, and they allow us to reach individuals who maybe are eager to succeed, but allow us to build diverse teams. So in the past, maybe I've delivered programs with ex-athletes, NEET, experience of the judicial system, the military, always really well received, returners, parental returners. It's really a lengthy list, but it's something that I'm really keen to do. So where and when a client is open to us bringing in somebody with a lower minimum skill set before being trained, it means that we're obviously going to be looking at the biggest talent pool of people available to us. So that's all things train to deploy. I would say I'm going to pass you back to Hazel, but I am assuming you might have some audio difficulty still. Nod for yes. Yes. Okay, so I'm going to become Hazel for the remainder of the session. So we're going to move into Q&A. With regards to the Q&A, we had some questions that were submitted on some initial registrations, which we will try and cover. And then what naturally will happen, if you saw John, myself, Miguel in London, we typically just go into overdrive and we'll talk about this stuff because it is a job. We get paid money to do it, but there is a large level of passion that sits behind this of wanting to do something. So I'm going to kick off with the questions. We talk a lot about abundance rather than scarcity, but where does that abundance actually exist, and how do organizations practically tap into it?
Yeah, absolutely. So I mean, I see abundance all the time, and I think if we just go from the beginning, I guess, of what we know about young people, and the climate anxiety is a huge part of people's experience now. I think it's something like 50% at least of young people have reported to be a little bit worried or very worried about climate change. As well as that, Deloitte did a piece about a few years ago that about 9 in 10 of Gen Zs and millennials, so 90%, the majority of young people, want to consider purpose a big part of their job satisfaction. So working in a space that is purposeful and meaningful. So if we combine those two things together, they're anxious about climate change and they want a purposeful job. Working in energy is the number one place that you can make that difference, right? 75% of global emissions come from how we produce energy. So straight away, there's an abundance of people that are worried about climate change and want to do something about it, right? So that's step one. The second thing I want to mention is that often I see employers or people in the energy sector focusing really quite narrowly on science as the source of young people to work in the sector. Now, the reality is physics is only appealing to a small subset of young people. From my experience of going into schools, typically it's young women that are not engaged in that topic. But there are other subjects that they are. So the big missing gap, I think, is when people think about STEM and going into schools is geography. So geography is all about sustainability in the environment, which young people care about. The curriculum aligns really, really well to energy. So we're looking at resource use and different geographies. Like there's loads of opportunities in geography to talk about energy. And that's where young women in particular are really engaged and interested. So our kind of content and our focus when we go into schools is to talk about it in that geography context, and suddenly like people that were switched off in physics kind of come alive. And as I've been talking, looks like we've lost everyone except for me and you, Dan. But I will keep going.
Okay.
So that's where I see the abundance, and that's where we approach it with Megawatt. So it's not just narrowly looking at STEM and engineers and scientists, because when you look at the energy sector, what proportion are actually engineers and scientists, and what proportion are all those other wonderful jobs that we need people to do? So by just talking narrowly about this, it doesn't solve that abundance problem. One thing one thing I have seen, which just from my experience, and which is not something that I'm solving right now, but I'd like to ask you about this, Dan, is that I studied engineering at university, and I would say 20% of us ended up going into an engineering job. Most of my colleagues wanted to go into the cities, into finance, into consulting, because there was more money, and it kind of seemed like there was more opportunity in the space. And that's where I see a big drop off, because there's loads of engineers and there's loads of people doing it, but why are they not talking about energy? And I think for me, one of them is a lack of purpose. So instilling that purpose in that energy is a space to work in, and that's why you study it. Great. But I think the second issue was that these young people want to live in big cities. And where are we developing most of our energy? It's scattered across the UK, right? But typically you're not going to be working in London or Manchester or Bristol. And I think that's why a lot of young people are turned off. So I don't know if you wanted to say anything about that, Dan. How do we tackle that?
Yeah, look, really good point. I am sat here from my throne of London, but I did go to university in Pontypridd, so I can. But I obviously working in early careers, it's definitely something we see a lot. I think a lot of graduates naturally gravitate towards major cities. I think many of the most important infrastructure energy projects, as we know, are not always based there, and they're based elsewhere. I think the key is about being transparent as early as possible, but also I think we need to start being a bit more creative and reframing the opportunity. Working on these major regional products gives people sometimes more responsibility and hands-on experience earlier in their careers than they would have got in a city-based role. And I appreciate that's not always the case, but fundamentally, from experience of talking to people, that is often the case. And I think the flexibility is there more than a lot of companies realize. I think we've done it with certain early careers programs we'd run. We might ask a question of like, which location do you want to work from? And you've given them a choice of London, Manchester, and then 2 or 3 others. I think the reality is I want to try and frame that a little bit more and go, a lot of those people actually just want that role. But you're giving them the opportunity and they are going to choose one. And that's where we need to be making really simple things. I think the challenge also comes with they follow their peers. We need to do a better job of probably bringing these regional opportunities to life. And that's things that I'm working on now. I've delivered early careers programs for years. I'm going to be launching something a bit different this year. I want to make a real difference and go use short videos, a day in the life, content from engineers already working on these sites, on these projects, showing the technology they're working with, the impact of these projects, being right kind of in the core excitement of it all. I think get testimonials from young people, young employees can be really powerful because they trust people who were in their position a few years ago. And the one change I've definitely made, hopefully will answer the question, is that I also think we need to think about the profile of the location itself. We're used to going, right, we have a job, it's in this location, that's what the job's about, this is the job description, how much you get paid and learning development. But that's a career and a life choice. I also think we need to think about the location itself, the lifestyle, the community, the cost of living in that area, what it's actually like to live there, hear from local people, local employees, because certain locations I've worked or I've spoken to candidates about, they've not heard of it, never mind never being there. So why would they want to move or select somewhere like that? So I think for me, when candidates can visualize both the work and the place, regional roles start to feel a bit more attractive. And rather than kind of acting as a bit of a compromise, I think sometimes the issue isn't the job, it's people just can't picture themselves there, and we've not made it sort of easy for them, I guess the question is.
I experienced that kind of firsthand because I always wanted to work in energy, so I could kind of take some risks, right? But when my first job in energy was in a place called Dungeness, and when I was told that, I was like, that must be northern Scotland. Like I don't. It was kind of quite scary. It turns out it's in Kent. It's not as far as I thought it was. But to somebody who's not so like driven to work in energy, that straight away is it's kind of scary and kind of off-putting. So it is really important to attract the right people.
Cool. Well, that's well said. I think we have the team back now. I believe at least one of them will hopefully be on audio. Control-Alt-Delete may have worked for either Hazel or John.
I'm nervous to speak just in case. Can you hear? Am I in? Am I back?
Okay. All good.
Johnny, you with us?
I think I'm with you, yeah.
Great. I am going to sigh in relief, and then I'm going to come and ask you a question, John. So these guys, when they were covering for us, they were talking about abundance rather than scarcity. And I wanted to ask you whether where does it actually exist? Where does abundance actually exist? And how do organizations practically tap into it? You spend a lot of time with our end clients. So tell us, like, where does this abundance actually exist?
I think where it exists, and and I think some of these have already been touched on already, but kind of as a top level, if you think about overlooked, hidden, underrepresented talent pools, like that is where the abundance sits. We're talking veterans, neurodiverse professionals, returning mothers, mid-career switchers, and like underrepresented groups. And give you a couple of stats around that. In engineering, this is. I was with the head of Women in Engineering Society. This was a couple of months ago now. She says that 16% of engineers in the UK are women. But when I've then had a meeting with a job board, they said that only 3% of applications for engineering roles were women. Like that, there's something not right there. There's a disconnect somewhere. And the same, let's start. But if you look at 9% of the energy sector engineers are from ethnic minority backgrounds. But again, 12% of engineers in the UK identify as an ethnic minority. So there's a misalignment, something that is going wrong. That there is abundance there, that there has to be, because the stats say different to what is actually happening. So that's where the abundance lies. How we can tap into that is to really look at what the problems are. Where's that disconnect coming from? And it's access, I'd say, is the kind of main thing to look at. And when I say access, it's around systems, processes, habits in a recruitment process. We need to open those up. Rigid requirements is one that we see, and look, I'm certainly not pointing the finger at anyone. Like everyone on this call, everyone in the organisations that we work in, doesn't matter if you're a company, a hiring manager, HR, a recruitment consultant, everyone who touches this process has got some responsibility here. We need to kind of demystify some job descriptions, reduce unrealistic expectations, like the would like to haves that put people off, like the wanting to replace a carbon copy of someone who's been at the company for 20, 30 years, like that just isn't going to happen. So changing the requirements slightly, I think then processes as well, that's something that we really do see. Recruitment cycles, future resource planning, very reactive recruitment leads to a tightening of the talent pool because demand is so high. So if we can change that a bit, then just things that we can all do, speeding communication, feedback to workers. Like, let's make that experience as good as possible. Like, if the candidates feel that there's a good experience, they're more engaged, and they'll start telling people about it. Like, we don't want to turn people off from the process. So abundance is out there, a number of different talent pools, but we need to look at the access. How do we make the jobs that we're all recruiting for more accessible to the talent pools that are underrepresented?
Big challenge, John, because I sit in the office across from you every day, and you get challenged on a daily basis. So what's new on a webinar? Something definitely I get asked, I get told quite a lot, and one of the reluctances to go down a trained employer or think about something different. They all sound great. I think you're right. Everything you've said there is 100% spot on. But I've got demand now, and I can't get CVs. What can we do?
Yeah, well, I mean, there is things like that, like job description. Let's have a look at the job descriptions. This isn't an engineering, a particular sector problem. Everyone is guilty in sector-specific job titles or just jargon, effectively. How can we debunk some of those that makes it a bit more open to people? That's something that we do as a recruitment team. We will try to take a real technical job description and turn it into an inclusive job advert. Like they are, a job description and a job advert are two very different documents. They are attracting the same person, but we need to continue to do that. Matching skills rather than experience. That is a big one for me. There's no doubt some jobs need some certain specific skills, experience, but others probably don't. Like, can we challenge that? How many times do we see must have X number of years in the sector? And energy is particularly guilty of that. Must have 3 years working on a project. If we can change that and start looking at the skills, then suddenly we're opening up exceptional talent. And it's not always possible, but I'd say there are two things that we can really do. Change some of the wording around the job descriptions and job adverts, and really challenge whether the need for experience or particular qualifications are needed, or whether they would like to have.
Yeah, and short term, I think, can be, it doesn't always have to be completely change everything we've always done. It's supplementary. It's like you might have 10 people, use 8 or 9 via the experience method, try and make some changes. But ultimately, I think it's about supplementing it with people.
Yeah, absolutely.
Dan, that kind of fits in, but also doesn't, with something that we hear around hiring managers are often fearful of taking someone inexperienced because of the time commitment. But what support does someone actually need to become productive versus what we assume that they will need?
Yeah, so I think it's a really quick one to answer. Honestly, I think it's something that's been a challenge for a while. I think it's a misconception in many ways. I think hiring managers can often overestimate how much support someone new actually needs. I think what makes the difference isn't constant supervision, it's structure. So when people join with clear onboarding, defined milestones, sometimes a mentor or a buddy they can go for guidance, they usually become more productive faster than expected. I think the other key factor is because we're training them in these types of things up front, that way they get more meaningful work quicker, which means practical experience, which means combining that with feedback. It helps people build confidence and capability quickly, whilst also helping them understand the compliance, safety, quality standards required in these technical environments. So yeah, it doesn't have to be all or nothing. I think, as I said before with John, you're hiring 10 people. We're maybe not saying bring 10 upskilled people into your business or try a different way for all 10 people, but bring ones and twos in and almost like let it surprise you is what I would say. I've brought them into teams before and they've been quietly surprised about how quick they were to productivity.
I think just jumping in on that as well, Dan. I think if you're looking at particularly industry transfers, it's very in rail, but depending on where people are coming from, like if they're coming from the forces, they're coming from a similar industry, like they can still be problem solvers in high pressure situations. They're complex environments. They're safety culture minded. Like they work in regulated industries. It's not just the sector that someone is in that is. It's not specific to that one sector, and that's the other thing. Like if we can create more pathways from other industries, you do get a more diverse workforce, and that diverse workforce is also really important in how we push projects forward and really problem solve. So it's looking at what someone can bring as opposed to putting a barrier up to say they've not got this.
Well, that links into social value, right? You mentioned there about like reskilling from a military background. Like Dan, Miguel, really keen to talk to you guys about this. Like if we get a question often about how organizations want to support social value, but they don't know how to do it consistently and sustainably, what is your advice? That is it as simply as investing collectively in programs like Megawatt? Is it part of a wider strategy?
I'll take the lead in that one and pass over to Miguel if he's got any thoughts on top of it. I think from my perspective, a lot of organisations genuinely want to support social value. We know they do. We know they have budgets. The challenge is making it consistent and not just like a one-off initiative or something. We can say a little bit of a box exercise for a lot of people. I think the most sustainable ones are the ones that solve a real business challenge. So selfishly speaking, train to deploy. For me, you're filling credible safety-led roles in a cost-effective manner, and you're bringing new underrepresented talent in. This ticks two boxes. The other one I would say is hot off the press a little bit, which is the apprenticeship side of things. I think one of the most growing routes in the recruitment market, which allows you to focus on local talent, reducing unemployment in the area, giving young people opportunities that they maybe wouldn't have got before. I think 40% of of apprenticeships from disadvantaged backgrounds say they wouldn't be in the current industry without that apprenticeship. And that's something we've seen quite a lot. So it gives access to people maybe not following your traditional uni route, which is growing for sure in terms of recent conversations, career changers, women in STEM, neurodiverse. So yeah, you'll expand the talent pool while giving companies social impact credentials, reduces dependency on benefits in the local areas, increases employability, provides skills that benefit the local economy. And I think in 2 to 3 weeks' time, the apprenticeships are going to change. That's been recently announced, which means that it's going to be way, way, way more flexible and in line with industry needs. It's been a problem for years. Anyone who remotely reads my articles on LinkedIn, I'll talk about how it's a broken system. Not anymore. It means that either you, the employer, or you coming to us at Rullion, we will then be able to tap into these smaller, not full apprenticeships, shorter modular training courses, which means that we will actually be able to create apprenticeships and small investments for you that will be cost effective because we are tapping into our levy on your behalf, or we are helping you to tap into your levy. But ultimately, apprenticeships for me are the most sustainable kind of route to market. I don't know if Miguel's got any kind of further thoughts on that one.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. So in my role, I talk to a lot of social value teams across different energy companies, engineering firms, and there's a real mix of how they approach it. And to be honest, it's still a bit of a wild west. There's a lot of supposed requirements and obligations, but when it comes down to the actual details of how you measure it, people are kind of making up numbers. I don't want to call out anyone in particular, but I've seen examples where people claim social return on investments that are improbable, and when I actually look at the numbers, are not true. But companies that are just looking at social value as, right, we've got to tick this box. How can I tick it the best way? Okay, cool. This gives me a 20-to-1 return. Great. I'll just put some money into that, rather than really thinking about what social value should also benefit the business and the sector that you're in. And there's, if we think about social value more integrated into the whole purpose of your business and the recruitment side, the skills side, that is core to all energy sectors. So I'm really surprised and disappointed sometimes when I see social value spent in ways that is kind of irrelevant to that business and irrelevant to the sector. Now, on the face of it, they might sound good. It might be a nice picture opportunity, and for the marketing team, it's a really nice thing. But there's a real opportunity with social value to redirect that to things that are business critical. And I think if you're a recruitment team, why aren't you working close to your social value to develop that pipeline? And I think that's where there's really big opportunities to integrate that. And some companies are doing that, and we're working with some of those, and it's really great.
Miguel, you've spoken there about another mindset shift, and this whole session today has been about shifting from scarcity to abundance. I'm wondering if there is one other, like, what is the main mindset shift that you want the industry to take away from today's discussions?
Yeah, absolutely. So what we do at Megawatt, it is great, it's nice, right? We're engaging thousands of students and getting them interested in energy. But what we're trying to achieve, which is attract talent in the energy sector, we can't do that on our own. Like, that's not something, we're not an employer, we're not a recruiter, we're that kind of first step. And without working with Rullion, without working with big employers in the energy sector, what we do doesn't really turn the dial. And what we really want to do is, we're going to be scaling up. We're reaching thousands of students this year. The goal is to reach hundreds of thousands, if not millions. So if we're able to do that in a way that there's a clear funnel from millions of students playing Megawatt to how to find jobs in the energy sector and opportunities, that will genuinely solve the skills abundance or skills shortage problem, in my opinion. And that's why it's great to be here with Rullion. And that's the kind of call to action, I guess, is like, how do we really scale this up and make a big difference and work with organizations like me. Dan?
Yeah, I think it's kind of like, if you bring it down to its core of what it is, as I said to Miguel before, we need him and he needs us kind of thing. I think we both could try our best to change the market, but we can't do it together. I think, you can't do it in isolation. I think the biggest mindset I would have is just thinking past the short term into the long term. I think I've seen it for a long time. A lot of companies care and they know what's happening. There's a problem. There's a skills shortage. We're not doing things correctly. Maybe it's often kicked down the road because we all have it. We all have it in our day jobs where there is bigger priorities, and it just feels like a luxury that we can. Do you know what? We know we'll have that chat, but let's have that chat in a few months' time next year. I do also hear a lot of people sort of say, what if I invest in people and they leave for a competitor? I train someone up and they go and work for company Y. I say, look, don't worry about that. If the person goes to work for company Y, at some point someone will probably leave company Y and come back to you at some point, and that's healthy for the sector. It's about getting more skilled people into the industry long term. Their project complete, your project complete, goals are being met. I think rather than probably the half empty, I focus on, let's get people into the sector, new eyes that would never have considered before, because we have companies like Megawatt and Miguel who are doing a fantastic job. He's got their eyes lit up. He's got their excitement, but it's about going and how do we capitalize on that as employers and education. And I think something Miguel and I talked about, it's about finding positive ways to frame it. I think Miguel asked me a question around kind of AI resilience and should we be really looking at that? For me, actually, it's an opportunity to get more people into energy and critical infrastructure projects because they are often difficult to automate. It doesn't remove it, but they do require a lot of human oversight, contextual judgment. So that means that we have a lot of early careers, people out there that want stable, meaningful careers. They've gone through a really challenging university period of the last 3 to 4 years. And now they're in a position actually where they want to work in jobs where they can actually have a lot of value. 75% of them want long-term stability and financial security. So it's about going, why don't we start spotlighting these sectors and these skills that are actually a really positive long-term pathway for future employment? And I think it all starts with Miguel, and we all need to kind of come together. John?
Yeah, for me, really quickly as we wrap up, the one mindset change for me would be to challenge. It might sound really obvious, but if everything stays the same, nothing will change. The same processes will produce the same candidates. So challenge where possible, push back on traditional processes, current practices, the negativity, try to challenge that to positivity. And I think if we do that, we can open up some of these talent pools of diverse candidates, and that will help us build short and long-term scalable workforces that are innovative and forward-thinking.
Oh, thank you, guys. I appreciate you all sticking with us and being patient with our technical glitches. Things always seem to glitch on us for the actual webinar recording, but go smoothly during rehearsals. So yeah, we really appreciate everyone who joined us today. If today's discussion sparks some ideas, then Rullion's Train to Deploy Toolkit is a great next step. You can see the QR code on your screen there, and you can scan that and it will take you straight to our toolkit. It's a practical guide to help you figure out how a hire, train, deploy strategy can fit into a wider workforce solution. Thank you everyone for joining us and spending your lunchtime with us, and hopefully see you guys soon.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate it.